especially if I'm playing slide guitar. When I play slide, I really like to hear the flesh of the finger. This guitar is set up a little too low, but I mean half of that is it. You hear that kind of attack before the notes. And dynamically, you can. I think when you hammer on and do legato stuff, you can. You probably have more of a wider range of dynamics, because when you hammer on, you can hammer on really soft. Everything's not picked the same way. So I don't know. I think it's. And then I got into saxophone players so much, and my legato stuff. I just found they were the more interesting guys to steal licks from, and I could do licks like and really, this time I'm just kind of going. It's like barely hitting it all, and everything is the left hand working. I have in this little brochure that I have to pass out, if you guys just want to pick one up wherever it's sitting over there. But there are some legato techniques that I'm not sure if I actually used those techniques when I was learning, but I found that they're good exercises for students now who want to develop the strength with their left hand, because that's really what it is like having the strength. There's exercises. I mean, there's probably a lot of guitar players in here already. There's one we used to do at Berkeley. It was like you make a major 7 shape, like E major 7. And then we walk one note at a time down the fretboard like this to your E flat. And you just keep going. And by the time you get down to the first fret, it really hurts because you're down here, you know. And then you walk back up with the little finger. There's exercise like that, and there's like these legato exercises that I have on the page that are like very harmonically pretty simple. They're whatever you want to make them actually, but they're like. It sounds simple, but it's to do it. You'd be amazed at some guys who can play really fast, but they can't go, you know, and make it swing or make it put it in the pocket. Sometimes the slower tempos are harder. So I have like these exercises, and there's one that's even harder. That's kind of a hard little exercise. It's harder than it sounds. And then it's up to your own imagination to kind of make that musical, you know. I mean, everything I learned, I always try to. I think the secret to learning it, to transcribing stuff, is to. I don't know if I'm still answering your question or not. I'm just kind of going crazy here with the ideas. But I mean, the idea is that, you know, take whatever idea you have and really make it go. That's one thing I talk a lot about in my clinics too, is working with motifs. It's Robin Ford had this real simple exercise, which I thought was nothing at first, that he showed me. He just took an open E and he harmonized it like E mixolydian. On the 2 strings on the B string and on the D string and the G string, and then we did on the G and B string, and he had me do it with all the different keys all over the place. And the kind of value of that is that you kind of start to recognize the intervals and the diatonic shapes in there, and you kind of know where the next interval is on the next string, and then you do it all in one position, of course. And that's like really useful, just as many ways as you can tear anything apart. So that kind of evolved into like a practice regimen that I do, where I will take like a small motif. I don't really anymore like take like a whole long line of Michael Brecker or Pat Metheny, but I'll take the little motifs and build them and make them into big motifs myself. So a lot of my legato stuff is just like where I'll have like an idea like might have been the line I learned from a Michael Brecker line. And then I just take it and go everywhere I can, up and down the string. I mean, up and down the neck. And try to connect it smoothly, you know. And then I might change one note and make it mixolydian. That was a Dorian. I might change one note. You know, so then you can kind of go crazy and make it, you know, Ionian. So all I'm doing is like, you know, by just changing one note, I kind of, instead of having one lick that starts in one place, I kind of got 10 licks that go up and down the neck, and I can do that same. So on my good nights, when I'm playing at the Baked Potato or someplace, I'm having one of those on nights where things are just flowing. I know that I have the propensity to actually connect all these ideas over the fretboard, and I get up and down with it, and I'm not even thinking about it. It just kind of comes out. But if I'm practicing, I'm watching Seinfeld or something at home, you know, I'll take like some little motif, you know, and try to go everywhere I can with it diatonically. And learning out licks or learning licks at all, the whole secret is getting in and getting out of those licks, of course. And that's the hard part for a lot of my students too. They'll have like one lick, but they have to kind of wait for it to go. And they go, and the whole trick to when you transcribe stuff is how you get in and get out of those licks. And so I have exercises at MI where if a student learns a lick, I say, well, okay, start on the upbeat, start on the and of 4, start on the downbeat of 3, start on the 4, just so you can get in and out of it. My mom, if my mom was in the audience, if I played something like, right in the middle of the solo and left it there, she'd go, where did we go wrong? But if I connect it to something like, she can always relate to that last part and go, "Ooh, that's my boy." That stuff makes sense to her. So I always try to. The blues is always. I was listening to blues on the radio the other day, and I was going, "Man, this is one art form that never gets old." It just all sounds so real to me now. When I'm in New Orleans visiting my sister, I listen to W.O.S there, and they play stuff, and it's like, it's hard to get. I get really tired of fusion fast these days. I get tired of anything. All the rock stuff is so genetically engineered, but blues is always sounds really fresh to my ears, and I think it's just because it's a real pure thing coming from someplace. So I've always played blues from I was sneaking into bars when I was 15 when I was a kid in Alabama, and so I've always had a pretty good blues feel, and I always just try to connect whatever outside idea I have. I always try to connect it, get into it from a blues idea, and then bring it back to a blues foundation. Works for me anyway. And when I think about most of the great players, that's what they seem to do too. Is they get in and out of those outside ideas really gracefully. I mean, everyone's different. Oh, you got a question?
Hey. You said you thought about, you wished you had started recording your own material earlier in your career?
Yeah.
So,
well,
tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, yeah. That's, you probably all have friends, or maybe you guys are this way, where you probably have some songs sitting around at home on your garage band or whatever, and you just have never, and everybody who knows that you're a pretty good player is, comes up and says, "Man, can't wait to hear your new stuff. It's going to be great," But actually getting it finished and getting it out in the real world is like kind of a scary thing. I remember my first CD, I came out and said, "God, everybody likes the way I play now, and they think I'm going to have good stuff. What if it sucks?" So there's a whole like insecurity thing of whether it's going to work or not. So not only is it that mental hurdle to kind of overcome to believe in yourself enough, or just get it out there and for what it is. I just, I used to beat myself up in the 80s. I was lucky enough out of school. I mean, I auditioned for a lot of bands, and I toured with a lot of people, Gino Vanelli and Crusaders, and Roberta Flack, and some great R&B players, and that was all fine. But I would really I was insecure to the point where if I didn't get some gig, or somebody knew me but they didn't hire me for this or that gig, I go, God, he probably didn't, he knew I played with that guy last week and he didn't hire me. Guy must really suck. You doubt yourself so much, and I know I'm not the only one, and there's greater and lesser degrees with everybody. But that when I did my own music and it was accepted, even if it was to a house of 10 people at the Baked Potato, having that done and finishing that was like the best feeling in the world. I mean, I wouldn't trade that for. I mean, I think just for soul food. Can't believe I just said that. I mean, for feeding your soul, for the feeling of accomplishment and pleasure, sheer pleasure of playing your own music and having people know it, or having people write you from Japan and say, "This one song means so much to me," And I could have been doing that when I was 20, but instead I kind of went the route where I kind of wanted to be like a Larry Carlton or Robin Ford. I wanted to be a sideman with a lot of people. I wanted to move to California. I wanted to be the next Steve Lukather kind of guy, And then when it didn't start really happening like that, I guess everything happens for a reason. But I'm kind of glad now, because at least, I'm not as famous as like Steve Vais or some of the guys in the world, but at least people kind of know me around the world as being who I am for what I play, and that's if I die tomorrow, then the music's still there. So people can listen to it and go, "Oh, like he had an emotion in this one song that I can kind of relate to," and that's something I could have done at a lot earlier age. But I was kind of narcissistic enough, and just traveling and being a rock star on stage, and chasing girls and being a rock star, that I didn't have time for all that. And I wish just looking back on things, and this is one thing I encourage my students to do. I mean, not only from the personal gratification, satisfaction you get from doing your own music, but financially it can be a great thing too. I mean, if you, I had a small piece of luck back in about 10 years ago on a TV show called Jag, where they used one of my songs for their 100th anniversary, and I still get checks, a couple $1,000s every quarter for that stupid little song that they used like a minute and 30 seconds of. So not only can it be gratifying that way, but it also can, if you ever get it on anything, and of course Los Angeles is the place to do that because everybody and their brother is hooked up with something in the entertainment business. If you can do that, then it can financially be very rewarding too. I know several players who make great livings writing music for TV shows, and actually I'm getting more into that. I have some friends that do TV shows, and I've been doing more of that the last year. So yeah, I mean, writing for every reason. I mean, the craft, and maybe I'm getting older too, but I know I'm getting older, but I mean, maybe this is part of getting older too, is that I really respect songwriters the older I get. All I cared about was a guitar player. If he played flashy and he was good, then he was cool enough. That was enough for me. But as I get older, I mean, I look back and Beatles or Steve Winwood or Earth, Wind and Fire or James Taylor, and people who just wrote really great songs back in the time that I grew up. That's the stuff that I gravitate towards now. Hearing the George Harrison guitar part on a Beatles song, it's just like, you cannot play that song unless you play those parts. That's a whole art form to me that it was kind of undiscovered too, that you get into more when you start writing your own music. You start figuring out how to the art of crafting a song is a thing of beauty when it ever comes together. You learn a lot about yourself and your playing and really where you are when you start putting your songs together, And I could have been doing that when I was 20, but like I say, I was just too busy. I had a rack this big, and I was, just too excited about my new lexicon delay to really worry about that kind of stuff. Which brings me to another point really quick, which will kind of bring me back to these pedals for a second. And I'm sure you guys all know who Scott Henderson is. He and I became pretty good friends when I was a student at MI, and I used to go to Scott's house like every other day. We were always comparing, George L cables compared to Megami cable. We were Celestion, greenbacks compared to the 65 watt. We were just comparing everything, and it was like at one point I had like for a gig I'd have a rack with all my pedals in it. I had the Bradshaw system. I was like miking a clean cabinet and then putting effects on the side, and it was like, whoa. And at the time I was listening a lot to Joni Mitchell, and if you don't know Joni Mitchell, she's just a great songwriter, and she had this one, I think it's a song called How Do You Stop off of Turbulent Indigo, and this guitar player, his name was Stuart Smith, was playing guitar in there, and he got this great sound, and he was doing all this stuff like, with delays, with the harmonics and tweaking this, and so the next month, ironically, there was an article in Guitar Player about him, and I was going, oh, right, man, I can't wait to see what kind of rack this guy uses. And I read about him, and he's from Tennessee, so I someplace down south, so I just assumed he had a southern accent, And he said in the magazine, he said, I've been using the same two amplifiers for about 40 years. He had like an old Twin, and he had like an old Vibrolux. And I think he had two pedals. One was he had two Boss pedals. That's what he used, like he had a compressor and I think a delay pedal maybe. That's all he used, and that's when I realized, I said, geez, you can get a lot of really great stuff without having a rack. I'm pushing into the baked potato, pushing this huge rack about 20 spaces high. It was getting kind of humorous at the time anyway. So at that point, I kind of simplified everything. I sold all my rack stuff, and I kind of just went looking for good sounding clean amps and good pedals. I mean, if there's a little hum, who cares? And if it takes away a little bit from your tone, it's not a big deal. I mean, so much of the tone is generated in your hands anyway, and at loud volumes, it seems those small things that seemed so important before didn't seem so important. So my life changed drastically the simpler it got. When I just started worrying about good pedals and good amplifiers. It's hard enough to play guitar than having to beat yourself up, seeing if you can afford the next $600 delay pedal or whatever. More questions? Oh, come on. Yeah. Who's that? Hey, Richard. Big D.
Can you take us through some of your pedals and show us how you use them on the gain structure and things like that?
I can. Next question? Sorry. Sure. I mean, like I say, it's pretty much simple. I'll start from the end because it's kind of what you hear most. I've really simplified it to I have a smaller pedal board where I have like one AC pedal or two AC pedals and a volume pedal. That's almost like all I use. But on this one, I have